Our second reading this morning comes from the book of Acts. We will read in chapter 16, beginning with verse 9. Let us listen for the word of the Lord. During the night, Paul had a vision. There stood a man of Macedonia pleading with him and saying, "Come over to Macedonia and help us." When he had seen the vision, we immediately tried to cross over to Macedonia, being convinced that God had called us to proclaim the good news to them. We set sail from Troas and took a straight course to Samothrace, the following day to Neapolis, and from there to Philippi, which is a leading city of the district of Macedonia and a Roman colony. We remained in this city for some days. On the Sabbath day, we went outside the gate by the river, where we supposed there was a place of prayer. And we sat down and spoke to the women who had gathered there. A certain woman named Lydia, a worshiper of God, was listening to us. She was from the city of Thyatira and a dealer of purple cloth. The Lord opened her heart to listen eagerly to what was said by Paul. And when she and her household were baptized, she urged us, saying, "If you have judged me to be faithful to the Lord, come and stay at my home." And she prevailed upon us. This is the word of the Lord. This weekend marks the official start of summer for many Americans. Cookouts and times spent on the lake or in the backyard are the order of the weekend. School may have a few more hours from some, but on the whole, children in our area this week are crying freedom, as are the teachers. It is a season marked by recreation and relaxation. In fact, this weekend is kind of the culmination of getting it all started. In the first church I served just outside of Philadelphia, I had a bit of a learning curve about what this kind of frivolity would mean. Almost every week from June until August, I would hear people have the following conversation. "What are you doing this weekend?" "Going down the shore." Down the shore. Have you heard that phrase before? It's something fairly unique to the Northeast, and it took me a while for it to register. You see, it's how those in Philadelphia and along the Jersey Shore, particularly those that are between that coastline of New York and Delaware, talk about going to the beach. The road from Philadelphia to that Jersey Shore, whether it's Ocean City or Cape May, is bumper to bumper every Friday afternoon. Down the shore was more than just about some destination, I learned, though. It was a way of describing getting it away from it all, to enjoy a time of rest, or a time to let loose and breathe a little with some much-needed fun. For those who were living crazy, busy lives in this bustling city, it brought relief and much-needed balance and change of pace. Today's scripture reading, I think, is a story of going down the shore. In some ways, it's quite literal, right? Paul and his companions, who we know from earlier verses in this chapter are Silas and recently joined Timothy, are on a European vacation, if you will. They're journeying through these Roman colonies like Galatia and throughout the district of Macedonia. We know from the text they follow this vision from God, and they've settled in this city for at least a few days in order to accomplish it. But when the Sabbath day comes, they take a pause. They go down to the river seeking for a place of prayer. And indeed, they find it and many other kindred spirits along the riverside. Paul's journey brings him into connection with this woman named Lydia. We are introduced to her as a dealer in purple cloth. It signifies that she's a businesswoman, likely a successful one. She's in charge of her own household, as best we can tell. And this purple cloth signifies that her business dealings were likely with an extravagant material, one that was reserved usually for just the elite class of Philippi. It is significant when anyone is given a name in Scripture, especially a woman. But furthermore, she is named in connection with her place in this community. She is presented with honor and recognition. Lydia, on this day, has gone down the shore as well. We presume she's taken a break from her business negotiations to engage in this time of prayer on the Sabbath. More than just a place to splash in the water or take a nap, the banks of the river were known throughout Scriptures as a place of nourishment and refreshment spiritually as well. We know from the text Lydia is a worshiper of God. It distinguishes her from some of the other Gentiles in the area. But at the start, her motivations are unclear. Ronald Cole Turner offers that she came to the riverside, a secluded place of prayer. Perhaps she expected to meet other women, Jewish worshipers, or Gentile seekers for prayer together. Perhaps she came regularly. But what she did not know that was on this particular day outside the city gates, she would be met by Paul and his companions, missionaries looking for anyone who was seeking God in this hidden place of prayer. There at the riverside, Lydia found the God who was finding her. And here is the center of the story. This moment of intersection between human obedience, both Paul's and Lydia's, and divine initiative. Longing and grace meet there on the bank of the river. The longing heart of a faithful woman is opened by the gracious impulse of a faith-giving God in an action that, like the incarnation itself, is at once fully human and fully divine. This seeming chance meeting that made such an impact on the life of Lydia and her household and perhaps others gathered at the river that day was only possible because both she and Paul dared to take time to go down the shore. They moved outside of the city. They changed the pace and the rhythm of their lives that enabled them to find a new way of hearing and seeing God's vision. What a fitting text for us on a weekend where we launch into a new season. Perhaps as we make our own summer plans, we might also consider in what ways we might be opening ourselves up spiritually to grow and encounter God in times of prayer. Throughout my life, one of my favorite places to go is Montreat, North Carolina. In fact, I can't wait to spend time there in just a few weeks. The past few summers, I've gotten to go along with our youth group to the high school conference there. And for at least a few minutes every day, I've been able to sneak up and set up what I call my office for the week, spending time in reading and reflection, either next to Lake Susan or on one of those creeks that babble as the ice-cold water tumbles over smooth rocks. It's especially peaceful. It offers this perfect backdrop for thinking and praying. There's no dings to tell me I have new email. There's something about the environment that seems to set up this possibility for having deep moments in faith, of simply resting in God's presence for just a moment, to take a deep breath. And while it's true, I can find these moments here in Georgia, they're harder to carve out sometimes. It seems that sometimes I have to physically move myself to a new location entirely in order to really see and reflect on what God is up to in my life. I wonder if that was the same for Lydia. We read in verse 14 that the Lord opened her heart to listen eagerly to what was said by Paul. She was hungry for some words of hope. No doubt Paul and his missionary companions spoke about the wonders of the resurrection, the joy of the living Christ. But here, though, we don't get some lengthy account of Paul's sermon, not like we find in other parts of Acts. Perhaps, and I say this both anxiously and keenly aware of the irony, perhaps what exactly Paul said in that sermon wasn't the point. What was meaningful was that Lydia and others were in a posture to receive the good news that was presented to them. And so the text asks us, where in our lives are we in the best posture to receive God's good news? Is it here in this sanctuary? Dare I say, do you need to sit in a different pew to shake it up a little bit and experience God in new ways? You're allowed. Do you find yourself open to hearing God with a cup of coffee on your patio and your favorite devotion book as birds chirp in the morning? Or is it when you're on a trip and you watch the waves lap against the shoreline with your toes in the sand? It could even be when you're sitting in Atlanta traffic. There's a lot of prayer that happens then. But what would it look like to open up more spaces in your life to receive God's good news? Our text prompts us, I think, to carve out those sacred spaces, literal and metaphorical, in our lives, and to engage in renewing prayer that can and will be life-changing. If you aren't paying attention in this text, you'll almost miss what happens at the end. Lydia and her entire household are baptized. She moves from opening her heart to God to opening her home to God's missionaries. We imagine her to embark on a ministry of hospitality, of worship and learning. She becomes a model of leadership in the early church. In fact, following their release from prison, which comes in verse 40,